And we are live here from the wonderful Sports Link studio here in Muncie, Indiana. This is the HB Toss made possible by the creative storytellers of Ball State Sports Link. I'm your host, AJ Swiatek, alongside co-host Jordan Klimes. And Jordan, we're in for a good one.
AJ, glad to be here. Long-time listener, first-time co-host. It's going to be a fun show.
It sure is. I'm excited to have you here, Jordan. Long-time listener, you probably know what's coming next. We're going to get into our first segment. We're going to start with the biggest movers. So for all you people at home, this is teams that have been flying up and down respectively in the power rankings. And Jordan, I think that there's no place to start other than the New York Jets. They've just been skyrocketing, haven't they?
Well, you're using all those flying references. Flying, skyrocketing. Yeah, the Jets are soaring right now. They add another one to that. It's been weird to see because coming into the season, they really were not favored to do all that well. Everyone besides you as a Jets fan kind of thought they were just going to flop again. And with Zach Wilson back, he hasn't really fit the part that I know Jets fans really want him to fit right now. But at the same time, Breece Hall is playing some really good football, and that defense, they're doing some fantastic things. You forget about all the young pieces on that defense that have been there, and now they're kind of coming together and really forming a fantastic defense.
Jordan, this Jets team, they've got off the ground, if you will. I mean, the Robert Saleh squad, everything's clicking. It's all coming together. They found their identity, and really, although they have the second overall pick in the draft in Zach Wilson, it's running the football. Breece Hall has been efficient. He's been electric. And this defense, they've looked really good. Sauce Gardner, he's just been an absolute lockdown. As you mentioned, to the surprise of just about everyone but myself, this Jets team, 3-game win streak. They'll head into Denver. We'll talk about that game in just a little bit. But this Jets team really feels like everything's starting to click.
Mm-hmm.
Another team moving up, another team in the AFC East, the Patriots of New England. I mean, they've been playing really good football as of late.
And if you told Patriots fans and NFL fans that they'd be moving up once their starting quarterback and Mac Jones got injured, they might think you're lying. But, hey, Bailey Zappi stepped in there and done a really fantastic job, had a really big week last week. And this Patriots team, they're getting going on the ground. Ramondre Stevenson had a huge game. Looks like Damian Harris is going to come back, so that two-headed horse in the backfield is going to probably do some good things against that Chicago Bears defense on Monday night. And then the defense, speaking of defense, going to the New England Patriots defense. Not something you think about them being fantastic just because of all the time when Tom Brady was there and you think offense, and all of a sudden, the defense is making some big plays. I mean, the first Super Bowl they won with Tom Brady, it was because of that defense. And Belichick and the crew in New England, they know how to coach a defense up. They've done a remarkable job.
And Belichick, I mean, it feels like he just knows how to do everything. What other team in the NFL would you be talking about moving up power rankings right now with a first-year rookie quarterback, Bailey Zappi from Western Kentucky? I mean, as you mentioned, they found their identity as well. Ramondre Stevenson, that ground game, it's all starting to come together. And as you mentioned, the Patriots defense just being brutally underrated. They're top 10 in DVOA in both pass and run defense. Only one of 3 teams in the NFL that can say that right now. And the AFC East, I mean, both East, the AFC and NFC, they're really shaping up to be good conferences. I mean, it really is remarkable.
And remember when it was the NFC least when we were talking about that? But yeah, it's been cool to see the transformation there.
Yeah, and in recent memory, it felt like the AFC least as well outside of the Patriots. Now you see the Buffalo Bills. I mean, they're sitting at 5-1. The Jets, we just mentioned, the Patriots and the Dolphins. Tua Tagovailoa is coming back this week. So AFC, NFC, both East divisions, they've looked good. Jordan, there's 2 sides to every story. We talked about 2 teams moving up. There's also 2 teams that have been moving down, and maybe in even more of a dramatic fashion. We'll start with the 3-3 Lamar Jackson-led Baltimore Ravens.
It's a weird one because you look at the Ravens and you think they're a solid team, and they should be a solid team because you said Lamar Jackson is their leader. He was an MVP not all that long ago, but it's been a weird season for Lamar Jackson. Really, his only solid game, or good game, I should say, was week 2 against the Dolphins, where he put up some fantastic stat lines. But since then, he's just struggled. He's done some really good things on the ground, but as a quarterback, as a franchise guy, which I think they think that Lamar Jackson is, he's got to put the ball in the air. He's got to make those passes. We know Lamar Jackson can run. We've seen it over the years constantly, game after game. But the question still, you think the answer would have been found by now, but can he be that guy through the air? We haven't seen it all that much this season. Lamar Jackson sure thinks that he is, but he's got to go out there and show it. And part of it is because there's just not many weapons on that offense.
Well, yeah, I mean, he certainly does think he is, huh? He wants the $300 million contract. He wants to be outpaid by Deshaun Watson. And Jordan, I'd honestly argue with you that I think he deserves it. Lamar, I think he actually has shown a big improvement in the passing game. And as you mentioned, the legs, I mean, they've looked as sharp as ever. There was a point just 3 weeks ago where they were on the other side of this segment. I mean, mean, the Ravens were moving up, and not only were they moving up, but Lamar was a co-favorite to win MVP. That was in short history. This team, 3-3, they'll have a big test this week against the Cleveland Browns, a team that's been faltering ever since that come-from-behind win by the Jets. If they fail to win there, I understand where you're coming from, but as for now, you're wearing the purple. I mean, I'm on the Lamar Jackson train. I really like what I've seen from Baltimore.
It's not dark enough to be on the train, okay?
Right, fair enough. But, I mean, Lamar, yes, outside of what he's been doing, I mean, I'm one of the biggest Lamar fans you'll ever meet, but as you mentioned, I think the reason that right now that Ravens team, they're on this side of the conversation, I think that comes from the receiving room. As you mentioned, I mean, he has no help. That team is beat up. They're banged up consistently, just having a hard time bringing receiving talent into the squad. I like Mark Andrews as much as the next guy, but Lamar has been throwing to just about nobody, and it makes it so much harder to make yourself elevated as a passer when your number one target, Rashad Bateman, who, I mean, again, I like Rashad Bateman, but is he a wide receiver one in this league? Probably not, and he's missed half the season.
It's a kind of a weird comparison because one was an MVP and the other one people don't like, but it's kind of like Justin Fields in the Bears offense right now. There's just no weapons for him to throw it to, so it's really hard to evaluate how good they are at the quarterback position. We know both of those quarterbacks can run the ball, but I'm not saying that Lamar Jackson is Justin Fields because I'm a Bears fan. I know all too well what Justin Fields has done this year, but at the same time, he's got to get Lamar Jackson's got to get it going through the air.
Absolutely, and with the way Justin Fields has been playing, I mean, any comparison in that ballgame, probably not a good one, and that's why the Ravens are on this side of the segment. But another team that we're going to talk about, another team that's been struggling, I mean, kind of surprisingly for me at least, is Tom Brady and the Buccaneers.
And we know all the drama coming into the season with Tom Brady and all that. We thought he was going to be retired, and all of a sudden he pops back up. I know exactly where I was when we learned that he was coming back to the NFL, a pretty special moment and a weird moment. You don't see that very much, although these days people just start coming back left after right.
Right.
But Tom Brady, you thought he was gone. All of a sudden the GOAT's back in football. You think the Bucs are going to go ahead and run it back again, and they're slowing down. And they've got the pieces. They've added more guys, and their receivers are coming back, getting more healthy. And last week they pretty much had a pretty healthy skill room with all those guys out there, running back, wide receivers, and quarterback. And against the Steelers, who might be the worst offense in the league, and they just weren't able to win that game. It's weird to see Tom Brady struggling out there because, as I said, defensively and offensively, the players are there, but they need to put it together, and they just haven't done it.
Right. I mean, we've seen so many weird things from this Buccaneers team. I mean, this is the first time really in Tom Brady's career that we've seen him get heated like this on the sideline. You mentioned the Steelers game. I mean, he was just, for lack of a better term, he was mad. Tom Brady was not happy with what he was seeing out there, but really he hasn't been putting up the numbers that are expected from the GOAT, as you mentioned. I mean, Tom Brady, he came back. This Buccaneers team instantly vaults into a top 5 Super Bowl favorite, but it just doesn't make sense that it's not clicking. Todd Bowles, that coaching staff, they look like they've looked the part. This defense, they've got talent all over the place. I know you like Antoine Winfield as much as the next guy, and so do I, but I mean, it's just really weird to see how the Buccaneers are playing right now. They have a big test this week that we'll also get to in a little bit, but I mean, it's just strange because if this Buccaneers team or this Ravens team both sitting at 3-3, if they lose this week and fall to 3-4, you don't want to say it's desperation mode, but it just questions they really have to start arising.
But you look at the year that the Bucs won the Super Bowl, and they started off the season slow too. I remember that Thursday game against the Bears where there was the third down thing with Tom Brady. They started off that season slow, and they came back and were able to win the Super Bowl. And it's the same type of thing with the Los Angeles Rams right now. They're starting off slow. They have the pieces. They just need to figure out a way to put it together. I don't doubt Tom Brady and that team's ability to put it together. As I said before, they have everything they need to be a fantastic football team, but they just got to continue to work, find their identity as a team.
Certainly, Jordan, you mentioned 2 NFL teams that are struggling to put it together with the talent. I'll tell you the other side of that coin. Look at the Ball State Cardinals. We'll step away from the professional field here for a little bit. The Cardinals, the comeback kids, whatever you want to call them, this Ball State Cardinals team is balling, coming off another come-from-behind win here at the Shoe. I mean, they came back against UConn. They didn't give up a single point in that second half, and the Huskies, they didn't look like themselves.
They've been the cardiac cards this year, right? That's another way to put it. And it's not what Ball State wants. They don't want to have those bad first halves as they've been having, but they just need to start faster. And you watch interviews throughout the whole week, they can tell you that John Paddock needs to get his rhythm established early in the game. We know what Carson still can do as a runner, right? He's one of the best in college football. He's 7th in the nation in terms of rushing yards right now, which is crazy from a school like Ball State, but he's looked the part this year. But they just got to get the offense established early, get John Paddock in rhythm, and then that defense just has to make tackles in the first half as well. And I think they'll be able to do it this week against Eastern Michigan.
Certainly, you mentioned an offense that needs to get in rhythm, but that defense, I mean, credit to them. They have looked really good. As I mentioned, didn't give up a single point in that second half. They've looked like one of the better defenses in a MAC conference that when you see action, especially this late in the year, I mean, the scores are high. You look at Toledo, you look at all these high-powered offenses. I mean, we're seeing 45-plus points a game. The Cardinals' defense, they are locked down, and really, who is that led by? I've got to say it's Nick Jones.
Absolutely, it's Nick Jones. He's comes in at number 2 this year in the MAC in terms of interceptions. He had 2 picks against Murray State, so he's had a fantastic season.
Certainly, and speaking of Jones, our field reporter Madison Surface stands by CB1, so let's send it down to Miss Surface.
All right, guys, we're here with Nick Jones. Nick, how's the season been going for you so far?
It's been good. Could be better, but I've been somewhat satisfied, still looking to get better.
All right, Nick, is there an NFL cornerback that you model your game after?
I say Denzel Ward. Kind of built similar. I say Denzel Ward.
And what cornerback did you watch growing up that you were like, this is who I want to be one day?
I didn't know I was going to play corner, but I watched a lot of Patrick Peterson because, I always thought he was, the best in the league when I was a kid.
All right, thank you so much, Nick. Good luck with your season, and back to you guys.
Thank you, Madison. And always also a huge thank you to the guests we get on the show. Nick Jones, always interesting to hear from CB1 of a successful defense. I mean, he has looked the part this season.
Hey, man, the defense have, as you said, they've had a fantastic season. Nick Jones, number 2 in the MAC when it comes to interceptions. He had 2 against Murray State, and he's been locked down before then and ever since then. And plus, he's been getting out a lot this week. He got out to do some stuff with Ball State Sports for homecoming. That was a funny video, so go check that out if you're interested. Nick Jones doing some fantastic stuff, looking to keep it up against Eastern Michigan.
Certainly, it's homecoming week here down in Muncie, Indiana. A big game coming up. I'm certainly looking forward to it, but a segment I'm also looking forward to, Jordan, 4 picks. We've got 4 picks for Week 7 of the NFL, a huge part of the season. It feels like this is the turning point. This is where we start to be able to tell where teams really are stacking up, pretenders versus contenders, and Jordan, really no game more important than this one in terms of division implications and in terms of just implications overall. We're going to look at the hometown Colts. They'll travel to Tennessee and they'll take on the Titans.
The AFC South has been this pretty weird over the past couple of years because it's been the Texans are just back there, and then Jacksonville for most of the time has just been back there, and it's been the Colts and the Titans fighting, and they just played just a couple of weeks ago in Week 4. 3 weeks later, now in Week 7, they play again, so they know each other all too well. But the factor in this one that I'm really looking at, 2 factors on the Colts side of things, is that Jonathan Taylor is coming back from his injury. He's looking to ground and pound and start where he was last year because he didn't start this year all too well. He's had some rest. He should be ready to go. The other thing is the Colts passing offense. If you're a Colts fan, none of us are, but we live in Indiana, so we see a lot of Colts fans. They've been very negative about Matt Ryan and what the offense has done, and it's explainably so early in the season because they struggled early in the season, right? But it's been this weird phase of they're slowly getting better, and it's really not noticed. Matt Ryan comes in at number 2 in the NFL in passing yards coming in to Week 7, which is just mind-boggling with us listening to all these Colts fans saying how bad their offense is. But Matt Ryan's been looking the part. He's been throwing the ball very well. He's been getting out to all those receivers, and he's playing a defense in the Titans this week that is last in the league when it comes to passing yards. They've given up so many this year. I look for that to continue. Even though Derrick Henry is probably going to do some really good things on the Titans side of things, I look to see Jonathan Taylor and Matt Ryan get it done for the Colts.
Certainly, and Jordan, mentioning Jonathan Taylor and Derrick Henry in the same sentence, I mean, that just gets you excited for a game that's going to be one of the better running back battles of the entire season. Of course, really excited to get Jonathan Taylor back out there, and I think that could be the deciding factor for this Colts offense. You mentioned Matt Ryan. He's been airing out the ball great. I mean, you have to imagine he's going to look even better with one of the best running backs in football out there to support him. Give me the Colts as well, and here's why. Titans coming off a bye week. A lot of people are going to point to that, and they're also going to point to the fact that this game's at home. First of all, we saw the Titans. They went to Indianapolis. Didn't help the Colts that they were at home. The Titans were able to knock them off there. And just in these last 3 weeks since they last saw each other, the Colts have played a completely new brand of football. You mentioned Colts fans being upset. I think a lot of that has gone away here in these past few weeks. They have started to really click at the right time. It's that time of season. It's when you really need to get things firing on all cylinders. And Frank Reich and the Colts, this team's starting to play good football. And with Jonathan Taylor coming back, I think it's just going to be all the more dangerous. Give me the Colts in a high-scoring battle. Another game, Jordan, we're going to move to the Jets, going to the Denver to play on the Broncos. I mean, going into the season, if you heard one of them was 4-2, the other one was 2-4, you'd probably point to the Broncos and say, let Russ cook that 4-2 squad. But no, this Jets team, they come in with a 2-game advantage over the Broncos. As a Jets fan, I mean, I'm super excited about it, but I also want to hear what you have to say.
Well, we talked about the Jets before, and we know we talked. They're risers, and we prefaced what they can do offensively and defensively. But looking at the Broncos, it's been just a struggle to wrap your mind around what's going on with them. Because I know they lost Tim Patrick early in the season. That's a loss that I think a lot of people kind of forget about because he was one of those receivers that not a lot of people knew his name, but he made an impact on that team. They still got Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton on that roster as well. Bringing in Russell Wilson this year, you think, oh my goodness, you said it, let Russ cook. They're going to be fantastic. They're going to be one of the best offenses in the league. Watch out, wild card Super Bowl team coming up. No. No, they haven't looked good at all, and especially offensively. Defensively, they've done some really good things. But one thing I want to talk about with Russell Wilson, a really interesting stat that I found this week. He has 5 touchdowns coming in to week 7. So through 6 weeks, he has 5 touchdowns. Now his career started in 2012. And from 2012 to now, he's had 5 games over that span where he scored 5 touchdowns in each of those games. Through 6 weeks, he only has 5 touchdowns. It's weird because it's just been really slow. And it's one thing to talk about touchdowns, but he hasn't had the passing yards with it either. Russell Wilson just looked bad. You thought he was going to look good at the start of last game because he was 10 for 10, I think, to start the game, and all of a sudden he just started playing like the Russell Wilson that we unfortunately had saw in the past throughout this year.
Certainly. And Jordan, you mentioned Russell Wilson, and he has had quite the career. You mentioned 5 games with 5 touchdowns or more. I mean, that's just phenomenal. And I feel like it has to get to the point where he has to revert to his old form. The question is, when are you going to get ahead of the curve? When is it going to happen? Is it going to be easy against this Jets defense? I don't think so. Quinnen Williams, he won Defensive Player of the Week last week. I mean, he came off a monster performance. I think he blocked a punt, had 2 sacks of his own. He is going to be tough, especially with the Broncos missing their left tackle, Garrett Bowles. With all that being said, you look at just the talent on both sides of the ball. You look at on paper, Broncos versus Jets. And I'm a Jets fan. I just don't understand how you can pick against this Broncos team. And that's so hard for me to say, but this just feels like such a Jets game to lose. I mean, I know it's not the same old Jets. That's what they've been trying to tell me since 2010, the last time the Jets were in the playoffs. Longest active playoff drought in the NFL. I mean, it's tough. It's not easy. But the Jets, it feels like one of those games. I don't even know how else to explain it other than a trap game. It just feels like a game where when the Jets are 4-2 going against a Broncos team that if they don't get this win, quite frankly, they're not making the playoffs. They need this win to continue the season hopes. I mean, it just feels like one of those games where the Jets, they're just not going to be able to find a way to win.
And this is one that could go either way, as we talked about. And you look to Monday night last week against the Chargers, Broncos-Chargers, a game that I thought the Chargers would probably run away with. And the Broncos were able to keep it close. It wasn't a clean game, really on either side. But they were able to keep it close in playing a Jets team. They're desperate for a win. I don't think I made my pick before, so I'll make it now. I'm going to take the Jets to win because of all these things we talked about with them rising. But I do agree with you. It could be a trap game.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be interesting regardless. I expect it to be a good one. I actually also expect it to be relatively low scoring. Zach Wilson yet to throw a passing touchdown in those last 2 weeks. He also hasn't turned the ball over. So I think it'll be interesting going both ways. I mean, as you mentioned, I could really see this game going in a matter of direction. And I think it really comes down to what we see, which Russell Wilson comes to play in Mile High Stadium. I expect him to revert to old form. He's beat the Jets a multitude of times in his career, and I expect that to happen here. Next game, Jordan, we have the Seahawks. They'll travel to Los Angeles SoFi Stadium. They'll play the Chargers.
And the Chargers are in this game, so you know it's going to be close, right? The Chargers just have a knack for playing in these close games, which unfortunate for if you're a Chargers fan. But I literally just mentioned the Chargers before on Monday Night Football. They had a slower game, really not what they were looking for. Justin Herbert, no touchdowns, not a lot of passing yards. Kind of upset me for fantasy standpoint because I had him. So won though, I beat my brother, but still would have liked to see him do more. So that offense was kind of slow. And then Seahawks coming off a good game against the Cardinals, who we just saw win on Thursday night. They looked really good with DeAndre Hopkins back in the lineup, but that's neither here nor there for this segment. It's going to be a tough game. Kenneth Walker's looking really good. I love to see the rookie from Michigan State get in there and doing some really fantastic things because we knew what he could do. It's been fun to see him now get his chance in this offense. However, Looking to the Chargers side, I talked about how they struggled last week, and Austin Eckler didn't really have that many yards, wasn't looking like the Austin Eckler that we know. We're now going into a matchup with the Seahawks. They've been terrible against the run. I think number 32 in the league right now against the run, last in the league. And with Austin Eckler lining up on the other side, you know he's going to do some dangerous stuff. Justin Herbert looking for a revenge game. Austin Eckler looking for revenge. Give me the Chargers in this one.
Well, Jordan, you mentioned that the Chargers, it feels like every single game is a close game, and I would argue the same thing for the Seahawks. These are two teams that play to their competition. The Seahawks came into this one, they were projected to be one of the worst teams in the NFL, but Geno Smith, he's got this team playing respectable football. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, as you mentioned, Kenneth Walker. This offense has players to be excited about, and then on the defensive side of the ball, you've got Tariq Woolen, Kobe Bryant. The two just pairing there of rookie cornerbacks, not something we've seen in the last 6 years in the NFL. You have to go back for the last time a team trotted two rookie corners out to start the season. I mean, they have looked sharp. They have looked really good with this Chargers team. We're going to go on the other side now. Austin Eckler, you mentioned, he has looked really good this season. I want to say he's number 1 in fantasy football points forward. He has put up multiple 100-plus yard games. I mean, he has looked himself. Then you look to the receiving room, and this is what it comes down to for me. Tariq Woolen, Kobe Bryant, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen.
Yeah.
Who will get the better of that matchup? And I think that's what will decide this game. I'm going to roll with the Chargers as well. I expect a high-scoring game. I think it'll go back and forth. SoFi Stadium, they'll have a lot to be excited about out there in Los Angeles, but I think that their hometown Chargers, they'll walk away with the win. One game left. We've gone through 3. There's 1 remaining. Another divisional battle, Jordan. Let's look at the Browns. They'll travel to play Baltimore. We talked about the Ravens earlier. You think they'll be able to turn it around here?
Yeah, as you said, we talked about the Ravens, and it's going to be an interesting game, divisional game. Browns-Ravens seems to be always close. But for both teams, it's been an awkward season. You talked about the Browns, too, in that Jets game. Looking at the Browns quarterback, Jacoby Brissett, he's one of those quarterbacks that kind of almost a career backup guy, but he's someone you could put in your lineup and he'll win you about half of the games. So right about at that point right now, they're 2-4, and so he's been doing some things, but he hasn't done all that much for the offense. And don't remember which game it was. It might have been against the Chargers where he threw that pick at the end that all but ended it for their team. So at the quarterback position, they're just desperately waiting for Deshaun Watson to come back. Running back Nick Chubb's done some really solid things, but looking to the Ravens, they need this game. Lamar Jackson's probably looking to have another really good game. He had a 100-yard rushing game last week. Expect him to continue running the ball. I've got the Ravens.
Yeah, give me the Ravens here too. Top to bottom, better roster. You mentioned J.K. Dobbins. He hasn't looked the part. Maybe the Browns, they'll have a little bit of a better time running the football. Other than that, I like this Ravens team just about in every spot more than the Browns. You talk about a team missing a player until Watson's back. I don't see this Browns team winning many more games. I definitely don't see them making the playoffs this season. But for the Ravens, it feels like this is a game they need to win if they want to make the playoffs. And it feels like this is the time where they make that push for the postseason. Give me Lamar Jackson. Give me the better quarterback. Give me the Ravens in this one. Jordan, I know we're looking forward to this one. There's a new segment for this week of the HB Toss. We're going to go to Hot Takes. This is a new segment. It's so fun to talk about. I mean, the NFL, it's all anyone wants to talk about these days are the hot takes. Jordan, I'm going to start you off with one that I think is a great way to start this new segment. Give me Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, that matchup we just talked about. I think they're going to combine for 250-plus rushing yards and 3+ combined total touchdowns in this one in an absolute running battle. I talked about how I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. These are two of the best running backs in the NFL, two of the best that we've seen do it in recent memory. Jonathan Taylor, he's excited to get back out there. He chose to sit out in Week 6 to get back to full strength. I like him to put up some yards of his own. I like Henry to do a little bit of his own. And at the end of the day, I think they combine for some major stats.
Yeah, we talked about it before. Having both of those guys line up against each other, it's bound to be a really fun game.
Certainly. Jordan, what's the hot take that you have this week? I mean, I think it's just so fun to talk about. All smiles. What are you looking for?
Well, as I mentioned before, I'm a Bears fan. We talked a little bit about Justin Fields. I'm going to jump back to Justin Fields. Now, playing on Monday night against the Patriots, a really good rush defense. But this is a hot take just because it's Justin Fields. First off, I expect him to get 100 yards rushing. It's possible. He had 88 last week against Washington. But the hottest part of this take is he's going to have over 200 yards passing. Justin Fields over 200 yards passing? I know. He had that one time this season against the Vikings. You want to combine it for both? Oh, my goodness. Hot take. It's been weird for Justin Fields, but they've got to get it going for the Bears. It's about time for them to start letting Justin Fields play his game. And his game is getting 100 yards rushing per game and about 200 yards passing. That's what we know he could do. We saw it at Ohio State, and if he wants to be a successful NFL quarterback, he's got to have stat lines like that, just kind of like Lamar Jackson, which we've talked about in the past. So expect him, well, don't expect him, but my hot take is that he'll have 100 yards rushing and 200 yards through the air.
Jordan, that gasp really got me. I thought that was funny, but I've got to say, I mean, you're a Bears fan. I see where you're coming from, but I don't think that's the Justin Fields that just about any NFL fan has known or seen. He showed very little flashes. For me, that's definitely a bold one, definitely a hot take. If he does it, then sure, I'll put you on this high pedestal. I mean, that gasp, but that's how I was feeling too, Jordan.
Maybe it's just optimism, but at the same time, I'm a pessimistic fan. But
Fair enough, but you look at one more hot take. I think I want to stay in the AFC South for this one as well. Give me the Jaguars not only to outrun the Giants and Saquon Barkley, but I think that they're going to win an improbable victory. This Jaguars team, they haven't had it all going through these past couple of weeks. Doug Peterson, though, he knows this Giants team from top to bottom. He knows what they like to do. Give me the Jaguars. Give me Travis Etienne. Give me James Robinson, that two-headed horse, as you called it. Give me that team. We're talking about rushing. I know your next hot take, you want to talk about passing. Who's going to lead the league in passing yards this week?
And as someone who's just coming back this week, there's two quarterbacks we're really excited to see come back. One of them is Dak Prescott. He got injured in week 1 with that thumb injury, only 134 yards against the Buccaneers. And it's been actually pretty good for the Cowboys offensively, and we know defensively as well. They've done some really good things offensively. Cooper Rush stepping in there, and what was his win record? 4-1 or
yeah,
4-1. He did a more than serviceable job while Dak was injured, and coming back, he's going to be ready to play. I've always thought that Dak's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I know people really don't agree with that. People are down on Dak and really just the Cowboys overall, which I understand they've been memed a lot, but I think Dak's a really solid quarterback. He can get it done. Losing Amari Cooper does hurt this offense, but at the same time, they still got Michael Gallup and CeeDee Lamb. Dak's going to come back with a vengeance. He's going to want to play hard and expect him to get the ball to his two playmakers out there, get the ball going on the ground a little bit, but especially through the air. I got Dak leading the NFL in passing yards this week.
That's a take that I don't hate as much as the Justin Fields one. Two quarterbacks, Dak Prescott, a guy I could get behind a little bit more. He's going to come back with a chip on his shoulder. His own fans down in Dallas, they wanted to run him out of town when Cooper Rush was 4-1. He goes into Philadelphia. He shows his true colors. This is Dak Prescott's team. CeeDee Lamb, I mean, I could see it. I could definitely see him coming back with a big game here, looking for vengeance, as you mentioned. And talking about big games, we're going to go into a fan favorite segment. Let's talk about fantasy football starts and sits. Jordan, we've got 3 starts, we've got 3 sits. We'll start on the green side. Who's a player that you're starting in all of your lineups, all of your leagues this week?
This is one that I've really been excited to talk about for multiple reasons coming into this segment. And it's a player that you're going to look at me and say, of course I'm going to start this player on my team. But I'm telling you to start George Kittle this week. And again, you're sitting here staring at me. We're looking at each other right now. Of course I'm going to start George Kittle. Idiot. But at the same time, He's had a really slow start to the season. I know he's missed the first couple of games, and now he hasn't scored this year, and he really hasn't had all that many passing yards. But going into a game with the Chiefs, it's going to be a high-scoring game. And really, the true reason why I'm saying to start George Kittle this week is, AJ, you know what Sunday is?
National Tight End Day.
National Tight End Day. I'm so excited for it. And guess what? Who's playing this game? It's George Kittle against Travis Kelce. 2 of the best tight ends in the league. Come on, you're going to tell me that George Kittle's not going to find the end zone in this game. They're both going to find the end zone. It's going to be a high-scoring game. Expect George Kittle to get in the end zone.
Certainly, and I'm going to stick with tight ends too. National Tight End Day. Woo. Who knew that was a holiday? But Week 7 of the NFL, here it is. I'm going to give you Cade Otton, the rookie out of Washington. He was the first pick in the 4th round of the NFL draft. The Buccaneers, they clearly like the guy. They put a lot of draft capital into him. I mean, in this stage of the NFL, that feels like a high spot to take a sheer pass-catching guy. But for fantasy, that's exactly what you want. Cade Otton, he came in for the injured Cameron Brate last week. He looked good. He was a focal point of the offense. And although this Buccaneers team, they've got a lot of mouths to feed, I think Cade Otton, especially in a year where tight ends, they're so hard to come by, he could be a great stream this week and just get ahead of the curve. Pick him up, put him in your lineup. When he starts playing good, now you've got a tight end for the rest of the season. I do not see Cameron Brate taking that job back. The Washington rookie, I really like liked him as a prospect, and I really like him as an NFL player.
And I'll be honest with you, AJ, I really don't know all that much about him, so it's good that you've mentioned his name in this segment. Maybe I'll have to make a move on my fantasy team to go try to get him up. TJ Hockenson hasn't done all that much for me. But I've also got George Kittle in another league. But yeah, I like that one.
Certainly. If you don't know Cade Otton, you're going to know the name after this week. 2 starts left each. We went through our tight ends. Who's a quarterback? Who's a quarterback you want to start this week, Jordan?
Well, I mentioned there's 2 quarterbacks coming back this week from injury. Dak Prescott is one of them, and the other one, Tua Tagovailoa. He went down with that really bad injury in week 3 against the Bengals, and we really didn't know if he was going to get back on the football field at all in his career, and it's just such a relief to see that he will most likely be starting on Sunday night against the Steelers. Through those first 3 weeks, before going into that Bengals game where he got hurt, he had somewhere around 950 passing yards. Through those first 3 weeks, he's done some really fantastic things through the air. Now, comparing that through 6 weeks, Justin Fields coming in a lot today. Justin Fields only has 869 passing yards through 6 weeks, and Tua had more than that through 3 weeks. So he did some really good stuff. And also, you look at his receiving corps, the best in the league.
Oh, yeah.
Tyreek Hill, leading receiver right now, has the most yards receiving. And then who's number 5 on that list? It's Jalen Waddle. And then Mike Gesicki. He said he's not going to gritty again, but maybe he'll get the end zone and not gritty again. Tua's to come back hot after that injury. I'm really excited to see what he could do, just to see him back on the football field again. I love Tua. He seems like a great guy. So if you got him on your fantasy team this week, you might be scared because he's coming back from an injury. How well is he going to play? But if you got him, slot him in there because he's going to have a fantastic game on Sunday night under the bright lights.
Jordan, even as a Jets fan, that's one that I've just got to love. He's coming back. As you mentioned, he has the best weapons in the NFL. Tyreek Hill, get this, he is currently on track to have the most receiving yards in a season in NFL history. He's over 700 yards through 6 weeks of the season. I mean, he has played absolutely phenomenal. He's on track for over 2,000 receiving yards. That's just unheard of. Tua Tagovailoa, even if there's a little rust to shave off there, I think he comes back, and with Tyreek Hill, he'll get himself a couple of scores. Tua's a guy I would certainly also start this week. And while we're sticking on the air raid, let's also stay in the AFC East. We talked about Elijah Moore, how he is not going to be playing this week due to that trade request. Who steps up? A lot of people are going to want to look to Garrett Wilson. I'm going to want to look to Corey Davis. Corey Davis currently leads the NFL. Get this, over 85% of his catches this season have gone for either a first down or a touchdown. He makes catches when they matter. He makes big catches, big yardage plays. And I think the Jets, they'll get into the end zone through the air at least once this week. I think it gets to Corey Davis. And if he finds his way for a touchdown, that's all you can really ask.
Corey Davis, when he came to the Jets from the Titans, well, for a while with the Titans, he was kind of one of those bust wide receivers who really wasn't doing anything. Then he slowly started to get better. Then he really looked like almost a wide receiver 1. I loved what he did there with the Titans. Then moving to the Jets, I thought that was a really great acquisition by the New York Jets. And he hasn't started off as hot as I thought that he would, but a player that has been kind of dormant this year fantasy-wise, but a solid receiver. If Zach Wilson's able to get that offense going through the air, then absolutely, Corey Davis will be a really good target for him.
Certainly, without Elijah Moore there, it's just one less mouth to feed this Jets team. They have so many players to target, but Corey Davis, he's looked better as the year's gone on. You mentioned we saw him have that huge year with the Titans. Am I saying he's going to replicate that here? No. But in terms of a wide receiver 2, maybe flex option, I think Corey Davis is one of the guys you look to, especially being owned in only like 25% of leagues. He's probably out there. He's probably available, and he's a guy that I think is a spot start this week. You can get him in there. He's going to get you some points. I talked about a receiver. I know you've got one more receiver to talk about, and this is a pick I really like. You mentioned Dak Prescott. Who's he going to throw the ball to this week?
Well, he's got 2 main options. I mentioned them both before. There's CeeDee Lamb. If you got him on your fantasy team, you know you're going to put him in there. But the other one is going to be Michael Gallup. And if my bold prediction comes true, then these receivers have to have huge games. I think Michael Gallup is lined up to do just that. Dak Prescott likes to throw him the football. Gallup's a receiver that a lot of people forget about, but he really knows how to make a lot of big plays. He's one of those toe drag swag guys. I know Nate Burleson's not there, but he used to have that segment with the toe drag swag. You'd see Michael Gallup on that a lot of times, and he's a fantastic receiver. He's had a slow start to the year. He was injured to start it, and since he's come back, he's only had 1 touchdown, and he has not had a single game with over 50 yards in that game. But with Dak coming back, they're playing against a not good defense overall when it comes to the pass. So Michael Gallup's going to get a lot of targets. And then CeeDee Lamb, he still has somewhat of a lingering injury, so he might be a little bit slower. He'll probably get the DB number 1 from the defense, and so that leaves more opportunities for Michael Gallup. If you got him, put him in that flex position this week.
I like that, Jordan. Dak's back. He's back. This offense is going to only elevate. Michael Gallup, a guy who I really like personally, definitely a guy that if you need someone to put in that flex spot, maybe as your second wide receiver option, I would definitely trust Michael Gallup as well. I'm going to stick with one more wide receiver for my final start. We also talked about him earlier. Give me Mike Williams. He has a huge frame, and I just don't see anyone on that Seahawks secondary being able to guard him. Don't get me wrong. Tariq Woolen, he's looked really great this year. He's got that 4.3 40 speed. Mike Williams isn't a guy who's going to torch you with his speed, beat you with his legs. He's able to go up, get those jump balls. Justin Herbert, he needs to take a step forward this week. Expect him to get in the end zone, and I expect Mike Williams to be the guy he goes to in the red zone. He's that big red zone target. Mike Williams, I mean, it feels like in a fantasy season where so many players have become so touchdown dependent, it's made Mike Williams such a more viable option, but he hasn't only been touchdown dependent. He has 100 yards or more in over 50% of his games this season. I look for him to do not only that this Sunday, but also potentially get into the end zone.
Yeah, I love Mike Williams, and you talked about it before, that Keenan Allen and Mike Williams combo. It's underrated when it comes to combos at the wide receiver position in the NFL.
It certainly is, but as we mentioned with the biggest movers, there's two sides to absolutely every story. With 3 starts comes 3 sits. Jordan, there's got to be somebody. Who's the number one player this week everyone needs to stay away from, keep him out of the lineups?
And this is a really interesting one. And we talked about the Broncos before. I can't trust them offensively. I can't really trust Russell Wilson. But I'm going to go to his running back, and we're going to go to Melvin Gordon. And if you followed football, you know there's been some drama around Melvin Gordon. He got benched last week, and he was not too happy about that. And apparently, him and his head coach, they had a conversation about it. And
yeah, that came out. Nathaniel Hackett talked to him, and now they're all great. But who knows what that really means?
Exactly. And the best part of that is hearing what Melvin Gordon's response to that whole situation was. He was asked if the situation was cleared up, and he had a interesting quote. It was basically just like little Tyler. He said, "Yeah, sure. I think so." It's basically what he said to that, which is like if my mom asked me if I brushed my teeth when I was a little kid. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I think I did.
I definitely did, Mom. But it's not a good enough response for me. Melvin Gordon, 29 years old. That's old for running backs in the NFL. It feels like he's been around forever. And Latavius Murray got in there last week, did some really good things. They've announced Melvin Gordon as the starter, so that as a fantasy owner might make you happy to slot him back in there again. But I just don't trust him or that whole Broncos offense to get much done this week.
Definitely an interesting situation. It just really shows how much you personally and how much fantasy owners buy into what the media has to say, because if you believe that he had a good conversation with Nathaniel Hackett, who's to say he doesn't get 20 carries this week? But you mentioned he felt like he didn't have the greatest conversation. He kind of showed it there a little bit in his words. Melvin Gordon is definitely an interesting player. He'll be a guy I'm keeping an eye on, because if he plays well this week, he's a starting option for the rest of the season. If not, you might have to start looking to Mike Boone. Now I'm going to talk about 2 running backs to stay away from. I just don't want you to start any player on the Panthers, period, but I'm going to focus on the Panthers running backs. Dante Foreman, Chuba Hubbard. These are 2 guys now after that Christian McCaffrey trade, which, albeit, I think we should talk about that for a second here too. Christian McCaffrey dealt for a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 5 to the 49ers. That's interesting in its own right, but it leaves a bit of a mess in Carolina. Going up against a great running defense in the Buccaneers, I just don't see them being able to get anything done. And this is kind of one of those situations for me between Foreman and Hubbard where I'm not going to be able to start either of them until they prove to me they could do something on a consistent basis. This is the worst offense in the NFL. They're on track to get the first overall pick. I think they have like a 40% chance of it right now, which through 6 weeks, absolutely absurd. I just don't see these running backs being able to get much of anything done on the ground, especially against the Buccaneers. Hold off on starting them, and if they start to prove me wrong, then work their way into your lineups. But now that McCaffrey's a 49er, these aren't 2 guys I'm really looking to play.
And the tough part about this situation, too, is they haven't named a starter, so it's not like you can go out there and grab one of these guys off the waiver wire and then instantly put them into your lineup. You really don't know if one of them at all is going to have a big game, which one it would be, so it's kind of just like the lottery in that sense of it.
Right, just stay away from both of them. McCaffrey still up in the air if he'll play with the 49ers. Jordan, I know he's not a part of this segment, but it's almost impossible not to talk about it. I mean, the NFL trade deadline, it's quickly approaching. Who do you think won that trade?
You know, at first I thought that it was the 49ers that won that trade because they got Christian McCaffrey. And for a player like Christian McCaffrey, and you look at the trade details, you expect there to be a first-round pick in there. We know the 49ers have given away first-round picks a lot, but you expect there to be a first-round pick in there, and there wasn't. But as you said, there was a second, a third, and a fourth for next year's draft, and then a 5th in 2024. That's a lot of draft capital for the Panthers right now. We've talked about it throughout the show. They're losing a lot of their players. They might even go out and draft a quarterback because I don't know if they found the answer right now. Doesn't seem like they have. And so I originally leaned to the 49ers, but I think it's about even.
Right. I think this is one of those rare times in a trade in professional sports where really both fan bases felt like they won, and I could see why they feel like that. The Panthers, they're just doing a complete reset. McCaffrey, now he gets a better destination. That Shanahan offense, they love to run the football. I mean, that feels like a match made in heaven. That 49er team instantly goes to a contender in the NFC. The Panthers, they pick up some much-needed draft capital. I mean, that second, that third, that fourth, those are guys who can instantly come in and play for a team with as little talent as Carolina. I like this trade for both sides, Jordan. I really do.
Yeah, and it goes to show with McCaffrey now being there, I had Jeff Wilson on my fantasy team. Now he's for anyone else to pick up because I have just dropped him because he's not going to do me much good throughout the rest of the season.
Certainly, and I mean, it'll be interesting to see what kind of role, if any, Elijah Mitchell plays. I mean, he was set to come back next week. We'll see if he has any sort of role there with McCaffrey. I mean, you know Shanahan, he's the biggest perpetrator of a running back by committee, but when you have a guy like McCaffrey, it's really hard to justify something like that.
Yeah, he's a 3-down back, and he can run it on first and second down. If you need a passing down guy, he's one of the best in the league at that.
He certainly is. And while we talk about passing, we just talked about the trade. That was interesting. Don't get me wrong. Panthers players, sit them all. Who's someone else you're looking to sit? I know that we mentioned the Colts earlier on. I have a feeling I think I know where you're going here. It's the guy from Cincinnati, isn't it?
Yeah, you might think that after the week that he just had, he's been trending in the upwards direction. I know we're not in the bowl predictions. A lot of people might have him in the start for this week, but I have Alec Pierce in the sit category for this week, the wide receiver for the Colts. And it's not because I don't think he's a good wide receiver, but I know they're going to pass the ball. They're playing the Titans, who have a really bad pass defense. So it looks like it's lining up perfect for Alec Pierce to have that great game. But even that touchdown he scored last week, it was at the end of the game. Granted, it was a game winner, but I don't think that they needed to throw that one. I don't know why they threw it deep, but hey, it worked out for the Colts. I like Alec Pierce. I think he's going to be a fantastic wide receiver in the NFL, but at the same time, he's still young. And the fact that Michael Pittman is still there is kind of scary if you're an Alec Pierce owner, because Michael Pittman has just done really fantastic things. Had a huge week. They didn't score last week, but over 100 yards. And against the Titans, certainly if you have Michael Pittman, he's in your lineup for this week against this Titans defense. But for Alec Pierce, I know people are really liking what they've seen out of him, but I'd say be wary of Alec Pierce this week. He has potential to boom, but he also has potential to bust.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just so interesting. You hear Sauce Gardner, now one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL, that he was asked, who is the best wide receiver you had to guard in college? He played against Jamison Williams. He played against all the top picks in the draft. He said Alec Pierce, and at the time, everyone's like, why Alec Pierce? I mean, he started to show it. That connection with Matt Ryan, it's starting to form. He started to look really good. I mean, I think it just comes down to the fact who you think's going to get the ball. This Colts team, they're going to be giving Jonathan Taylor, you'd have to imagine, at least 20 carries, and after that, the ball can only go around so much. You're favoring Michael Pittman. Alec Pierce, a guy who was owned in just 3% of leagues just 2 weeks ago, all of a sudden has to be on a starter sit list. I mean, it's interesting to look at, but I see where you're coming from there. I can definitely understand keeping Alec Pierce on the bench.
And if your team is having some issues with bye weeks or injuries, sure, put Alec Pierce in that flex spot because he has potential, like I said, to do some really good things against this not too good Titans defense. But I'm saying be wary of him.
And, you know, my next sit, I think this one might catch a little bit of people off guard. My hot take I just went over, I said I think the Jaguars are going to win, but I don't think Christian Kirk plays a big part in that. With Travis Etienne looking better and better, I just don't see Doug Peterson making Trevor Lawrence's job any harder than it has to be. I don't think he's going to be trotting back to pass too many times in this one. I expect this to be a running game between Etienne, Robinson, and, as we mentioned, Saquon Barkley. I just don't see where Christian Kirk fits into that. This isn't a time where I like him. It feels like he's taking a step back just about every week. I mean, 2 weeks into the season, it looked like he was a fantasy wide receiver 1. Now he's a guy on the sits list.
And you look at the Jaguars team, and I mean, when they played the Colts, it was like, oh my gosh, they could do some really good things, even the week prior to that. But they've slowly taken some steps down. Offensively, Trevor Lawrence looked really hot to start off the season, and then he just started degressing and going in the wrong direction.
Certainly, Trevor Lawrence, he has taken a step back. It will be a huge week for him against the Giants defense that's been playing really well. Another guy going against a defense that has really stepped up. Who are you looking to sit here? I know that they're going up against Patrick Surtain and that team. I mean, what is Brandon Ayuk? Why is he on your sit side?
Well, he's someone that just scored 2 touchdowns last week. If you had him on your bench, you're really upset. And if you had him on your bench, you're probably like, oh, I got to throw him in my lineup this week because he just scored 2 touchdowns. But at the same time, we talked about McCaffrey's there now. They still got Deebo Samuel, a lot of weapons offensively. And Brandon Ayuk is a guy that he's really a player that has a really high ceiling and a low floor, and that's about it. He rarely does anything in between. It's either he's scoring 2 touchdowns in a game or he's getting you maybe 2 receptions in a game. That's just kind of how the 49ers run their offense. Just overall, they like to run the ball a lot, but at the same time, it seems like Ayuk needs to be game planned into games and really doesn't just get those volume and targets that you look for in a fantasy wide receiver. So I know he had 2 touchdowns last week, but Christian McCaffrey now on this team. It'll be interesting to see if he starts and if he does, how many carries he will end up getting. Plus, Deebo Samuel's still there. I don't think Ayuk goes off again.
Right, you mentioned Ayuk. I mean, it feels like he's such a boomer bust player, and I feel like a lot of that has to do with the quality of teams that he's playing against. I mentioned how he struggled against Pat Surtain just 2 weeks ago against the Broncos. The Broncos somehow were able to miraculously pull off that victory. That's a whole other conversation. But Ayuk, he'll be playing against the Chiefs, as we mentioned. It's tight end. It's National Tight End Day on that Sunday. We'll see Kels. We'll see Kittle. They'll be the headliners of it. And as you mentioned, there's just so many mouths to feed there now. If McCaffrey is playing and active this week, as I expect him to be, there'll be McCaffrey, there'll be Kittle, and there will be Deebo Samuel, all who I expect to get a bigger workload than Brandon Ayuk. And if you're an owner of him, it feels like it's time to get rid of him.
Either that or just keep him on the bench.
Right. At least keep him on the bench for the time being. And another guy that I think you're going to have to keep on the bench, the last one of this entire segment, that's going to be Terry McLaurin. He was on the other side of this just a little bit ago, but scary Terry, he hasn't been too scary this season. Curtis Samuel has carved a clear role in this offense, which has made it such a bad situation even worse for scary Terry. I mean, it's just tough. Carson Wentz, he's hurt. Now it's going to be Taylor Heineke. It feels like a guy with so much talent. He's been put in such a bad position, not only as a player, but especially as a fantasy player.
Well, you talked about people calling him Scary Terry, and usually that was because he was scary for the opposing defense, but now he's kind of scary for your fantasy team. And you talked about Samuel. I thought that was a really good acquisition. Did some really good things with the Panthers.
Yeah, McLaurin, he hasn't broken that 100-yard mark since week 2. Don't expect that to change here, and I think that that's really a good place to wrap this up, Jordan. We talked about our starts. We talked about our sits. I think week 7's a week to be really excited about. This was the HB Toss. I'm AJ Swiatek alongside Jordan Klimes. For our entire crew, shout out to Madison Surface, everyone behind the cameras, Adam Duwel, Charles Smart, Ryan Stojetz, Tyler Klimes. This would not be possible without the creative storytellers of Ball State Sports Link. This is the HB Toss, brought to you by Victory Honda of Muncie, signing off.